Waterman. It is so fun and wonderful to have you with us. You have no idea how I was hoping and praying to get the triumvirate, you and Sylvia Earle and Jean-Michel, on this summit, and here you are.
That's the finest company that I could ask for. Those are two fine people and old friends, and Jean-Michel came on so well after Cousteau had gone to pick up that momentum, and has done a beautiful job talking about environments, and Sylvia Earle, of course, is a super pro.
Well, you're all pros, and we need your leadership right now or not even just your leadership, but we need your support as we step out into this unknown world, this place where we all need to be communicators of the ocean world. We all need to step up onto our little platforms and our little stages. You guys are on the big stage, but I think each of us in the industry, we need to develop our own platforms to be able to get the word out and help people to become part of the solution. So I appreciate what you're doing, and this is why I have you here, because, okay, so if anybody ever needs any help in presentations, you need to buy this book, because it is so beautifully written. It is Stan at his most erudite, most urbane, and possibly most ribald.
Well, very true. All you say is not exaggerated at all. I've been compared to, well, Conrad and Shakespeare and others.
Well, you know, your presentations are held, you know, for posterity between the covers of this book, and so many people I know, and me included. I remember back in the day when I was always going to all of these film nights, and if you were on the stage, you know, we had to go because we had to hear what you were going to say.
But my dear, this must bear on the discussion we had previous to this, that you were to get some percentage of my royalties. The book has been doing very well anyway, and I thank you for that big boost.
Well, you know, I read Sea Salt and now More Salt, and I wish that we could maintain the kind of turns of phrase and the repartee that you have this incredible ease with. And so let's go for it. Let's do this. Let's talk about some of the stories from your 8 decades of diving and filming dangerously, and then take us to the present. Let's where do you want to start?
Well, needless to say, I've been thinking a bit about this interview coming up and so on, beginning to think of a few experiences way back, I guess in the late 50s, the first time that I went to Bonaire, the first time I had an indication of action being taken to help safeguard what we have in the sea, this precious area that we've gone into. And I might even append that by telling you that when I was a farmer in Maine and bored to death with blueberry farming, but lived right next to the sea and had grown up as a young boy in the 30s, surfing Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, and swimming up in Maine, and reading about what Cousteau was doing, I said, this aqualung has been is the passport to opening up the sea to millions of others. Hard hat diving, commercial diving was beyond us, and that led to it. And that first time, way back then in Bonaire, when I met Captain Don, and he didn't even have a dive boat, but we went out to a place along the shores there and went out using his pickup truck with the new aqualungs and so on. And he had started putting down permanent moorings so that the boats coming in didn't tear the reefs apart with their anchors. Conservation, the beginning of it. And then, of course, snowballing into what we know today is a peril for all the oceans of the world. And I think everybody has to be aware of how precarious it has become, that we better be doing something about it.
Well, the thing that I'm amazed at is that how fast it's all happened, because I remember back in the late 80s and 90s when I was in Cayman and you were working with Aggressor and you know, Cayman has been quite much on the forefront of conservation. But since that time, since I first met you, it has changed really, really fast.
I wish it could change even faster, but there are what we call inexorable forces that always butt against the conservation moves that we'd like to make. And just very recently, with news from the environmental protection people and from Wild Aid and others who are dedicated to the conservation movements, I learned that there is in Congress a move to modify or change the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which did so much to begin to put a hold on the commercial fishing, which was had reduced almost by 90% the food that we brought from the sea. And to tie that in, of course, with population expansion and the need for controlling, it's a perilous thing, but always that is beyond tomorrow. And there are big, powerful forces, and there have been for 1,000 years, who buck that because it's profitable for them to do the work they do with excessive fishing, excessive use of or industry not controlling its effluents, and so on and so forth. And so I was thinking and talking this morning, or calling attention to the fact that the most powerful way that we have of bringing about controls that we wish we could is through our legislators, through our constituency, with those who are elected. And opposing that, of course, are the forces, the commercial forces, who are thinking of their stockholders, their profits, and it goes on. And Congress, our Congress, any Congress in a country, through legislation, is a powerful way of bringing about what we hope are sensible controls for harvesting the sea. And that technology of fishing, of course, outran the ability of marine animals to reproduce themselves. And so it was a losing battle. And the oceans themselves, of course, impacted terribly by the effluence that goes into it. And blah, blah, blah. I mean, these are so familiar things today. But, and this should really be the finishing point in our conversation, take some action, contact your congressman, and be aware of legislation that can help. What we need to do is to protect the oceans of the world. It's moving much too fast now. It's moving towards the demise of the oceans, and they control our weather and our whole lives. Wow, that was a big long...
That was great spiel. I love it. You know, but here's the thing. What you just said about these big forces, these big economic powers that have been controlling our environment and how it's being used and abused. We on the summit, we've been talking about our own economic power and coming together as an industry, or global industry, and choosing, as you say, to exercise our citizen muscle and not just talk to our own consumers, but do as you say, and that is to talk to our officials and our elected representatives about the importance of ocean conservation and stopping some of the raping and pillaging that's going on in the ocean commons right now. And I'm not sure if you know, but a whole bunch of us were in D.C. a few weeks ago, and we were being trained to go up to Capitol Hill and do just that. And I think more and more people need to get this training about how to speak to their representatives. I know I was nervous. I didn't know how to do it. I've never done it before, but it's actually really simple. It's no more difficult than talking to a potential dive student. It's really quite straightforward. And they're open to it.
There are many organizations today, well organized, effective, and dedicated to protection of the oceans, and we are importuned with them. They come in on your own email all the time now, ask you, will you support this, tell you how to do it, make it easy to not just put it off of your screen, but click this and say no to what is being done to block that. I remember an interesting example of all of this in Ecuador, and I went many times during the years to the Galapagos, that rare, precious anomaly which still takes us back into the time of evolution of marine animals that still exist there nowhere else in the world. And we have hoped to protect them. The fishing interests, of course, did not want to be interfered with. And the government of Ecuador was hit back and forth by two forces on either side. And they did very happily finally opt for ecotourism, and tourism becoming so big in the Galapagos that it was an effective economic force. And so they bucked the push by the fishing commercial, which of course have their own interests at heart, and opted for protecting that precious resource. I mean, it went back and forth, and we watched it. And at one time, of course, they were taking, with the by trash and everything, the great manta rays, those magnificent animals, and the sharks, of course, for shark fin soup. And one of the organizations that I did join and was on the board of was Shark Savers. And who ever thought of saving sharks, man-eaters, and so on? But way, way back, those of us who began to go into the sea and wanted to do documentary films and videos that were interesting to the mass audience, sharks were a big draw. And we began to find that they are intelligent in their own range, that we could work with them, being very careful to do so, and that they weren't spontaneous killers, and we could coexist with them in the oceans. And so we have. But 7 million of them a year were being wantonly destroyed just for their fins, for shark fin soup, blah, blah, blah. and it's an interesting example of that yin and yang and the back and forth going between those two big forces. And as I say, government legislation has the muscle to make the differences. So get in touch with your representative and know what's going on.
I was thinking that, since you made Blue Water, White Death and Jaws with Peter Benchley, you've been backpedaling ever since. About sharks. I know your children were involved in the film The Man Who Loved Sharks, and you have been doing everything, and as well Peter, when he was alive, you both were doing everything you could to help stop the decimation of the shark populations. What do you think needs to happen? I think we're just so close to a tipping point. What do you think has to happen for us to just stop the carnage?
The battle goes on. What has to happen is among other things, an increasing care by those who have the means to make a difference. And I'm talking about this new age of billionaires. And I like the kind of action that Bill Gates, for instance, one of the wealthiest men in the world, has taken in using the enormous fortune for many good causes. Others don't, and there are, in fact, billions of dollars that can go into part of what the very, very wealthy are earning to exert some interest in the environmental thing instead of their own gain. And this sounds almost like a communist pitch, but you don't need 2 yachts and 3 villas and so on and so forth and still live comfortably. After all, I live myself with only 4 houses in different countries of the world and a yacht the size of the Queen Mary.
Well, you do admit that you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You do admit that. And you did make reference to something about being a snotty-nosed private school kid. Just saying.
Well, I did write in the book a little bit more autobiographically than I did in the first one, and admitted that I was a romantic, and I think it probably started years ago in the 30s when I acquired a book by Colonel John D. Craig called Danger is My Business. And I read this under covers with a flashlight at nighttime and read about this terrible scene in which his buddy was attacked by a manta ray and carried away. And the last they heard over the hard hat helmet communication into the surface where they were pumping air to him was a scream of panic. And so Colonel Craig quickly suited up, went down, and all he discovered was a pair of hard lead boots or shoes, diver shoes, still left on the bottom. But the camera that was on a tripod filming this recorded this hard scene of this devil ray, a manta, coming in, grabbing him in its arms and dragging him away to his doom. when they recovered the camera and the film was still great in it, of course, and so on. And I said, wow, this is the way to live. and I was all wrapped up with Robin Hood and the Knights of the Round Table and stuff like that. And I really went into diving for the adventure. And also when thinking about talking with you today, all of us who started so long ago, and I'm talking back in the late 40s, were mad for spearfishing. I mean, this is the big male thing, hunting. And so now going down with a tank is like shooting trout in a barrel. And when I built my boat back in, what was it? I guess it was about 53 or 4, and took it to the Bahamas to charter a boat there. This was irresistible. And then I began to discover that the fish that I was shooting were the ones that I wanted to show to people who I was bringing to take pictures underwater and so on, and far more valuable than just the fun of shooting fish. And for instance, in the Caribbean, all through the islands, where diving has become a big, successful commercial venture, what used to be fishing entirely has turned into the protection of their environments for people who come and want to see what is there and bring back their own videos to amaze people at home, and their still pictures in all the publications. And so I became dedicated to never shooting anything again underwater, but instead recording what I was seeing and then the pleasure of sharing it with people in the film festivals that the diving communities began evolving all around the country. And so that movement among divers has escalated, is a powerful factor today, and just so.
I think of you as what was it, like a 6 or 7 year old kid, and you got this pearl diver mask from Japan as a special gift from a family friend, and you went to Dartmouth College, and you did all of these. You were not, according to your family trajectory, you were not destined to be doing what you're doing now. And I think this is just fascinating. But somehow you're allowed to follow your passion and do extremely well with that. Can you give us any pointers as to how to follow your passion and do what you love and still be able to make a living? Got any ideas?
Well, I know a good one, and I draw on my friend Robert Frost. And I studied with Robert Frost at Dartmouth and was just lucky to do so as an English major there. But he said, you must make your vocation your avocation. He said, as your two eyes make one in sight. Only, he said, where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sake. And he meant that you must love what you are doing if, as you come into the last of your life, you find it has been worthwhile and it has been something done for the good. And he said it so well in so many ways, and I've used Robert Frost often and others too in talking and writing. But I was fairly late coming along with that. I didn't know what to do with an English major at Dartmouth, maybe become a teacher. But then I just went up to where we had a home in Maine and loved working there. And blueberry farming was one of the major economic things in Maine. Got into it, and blueberry farming sucked. And you did nothing in the winter but make furniture in your garage and so on and mark time. And then came the Geographic that we subscribed to with a Cousteau article, and he was in the Red Sea, and he was working with sharks, and Jeannie Clark was his guest there and so on. And I thought, who are these people who do these things, and which wonderful adventure is a part of their lives, and it has become a successful thing for them. And I think that I dredged up also something I'd remember from Conrad when he wrote that Stein was counseling Lord Jim, who was a dropout, and he said, no. He said, you have to stay with it. He said, the thing is, he said, to the destructive elements submit yourself, and by the exertion of your hands and your feet in the water, make the deep, deep sea hold you up. And so you have to get in there and do something. You have to have a change. And that was the genesis of my beginning to think, you don't have to be a blueberry farmer for the rest of the life and make birdhouses in the in the garage. And so I got to it, went to work and made it work. And indeed, after all of these years, almost half a century of being in the sea, I have also what in The Wind and the Willows they called a goodly store of memories to come back with. So I can put it together so much easily, and thank heavens for English majoring. I've often thought, because, some of the major colleges, even in the Ivy League, are thinking of dropping Shakespeare. And it has seemed to me that to have a good rounding in your own civilization, no matter what you do, if you're going to pump gas or work at a restaurant or whatever for the rest of your life, at least know what you have as a heritage behind you in literature and art and so on. And so going into the sea and having that has been a tremendous asset. And I've used it outrageously in my books.
And we are forever grateful that you stepped away from your path as a blueberry farmer and birdhouse builder to just grace us with all of your wonderful stories, which reminds me of one of my absolutely side-splitting moments was reading your chapter about that shark cage dive that you banged together with some chicken wire and it didn't have a lid. Oh my God. I just thought it was hysterical.
You know, that was off of Montauk, of all places. We don't think of Long Island as having sharks, but they have white sharks because the continental shelf is fairly close. And indeed, that was on a shoot for the American Sportsman show years ago, and they wanted to get white sharks. Sharks were big, and for the media, you know, dangerous marine animals. And I was earning my living by doing documentaries that they wanted. And so they swamped together a protective cage with chicken wire on it. And indeed, I went down from our boat, which is out by the edge of the continental shelf, and we had two big white sharks working on a dead whale. And the cage was swept underneath the boat by the current, sort of turned a bit on its side. And one of the sharks, interested in the cage, got tangled in the lines and his head got stuck in the top. And the more it struggled, the more it came down into the cage, trying to get out of it, until I was finally squatting at the bottom and finally held it off with the dome on the camera and helped push it out so to get away. I thought, wow, this is dynamite stuff, you know. They'll love this. And so when I finally yanked on the lines to be pulled up and got up, I expected they'd all be in an uproar on the boat about this excitement. And my son Gar was with me on that trip. And he said, anything happen? Anything happen? Do you know that I was teetering on the brink of death down there by these snapping jaws? And, no. They were playing gin rummy up there while I was facing death down below.
Oh my gosh, it's just, you can't make this stuff up, Stan. You can't. You just can't.
Well,
Now, I want to talk to you about another story, which I thought was just beautiful. It was the story of you being in the band to sea with your daughter, Susie, and her having an impromptu medical crisis.
Oh dear.
That was an incredible story. I had no idea that had happened.
It was a very poignant thing for both daughter and father, not knowing if she was going to die. Yes, we were in the band to sea, and we were finishing our trip at I forget, one of the remote islands off of Fiji, and with nothing but a small field hospital, and she had a burst appendix, and we managed to get her ashore. We couldn't get a medevac. We were so remote, that is an air rescue and so on, and the operating table was in a little hut next to the hospital, on a kitchen table with just one light up above and nothing but chloroform and just it was possible that she wouldn't survive. Well, it emphasizes the fact that as you dive all over the world, which we do today, of course, we're in third world countries that don't have the medical facilities that we wish they had, and that indeed, things can happen when you're out at sea. like a burst appendix and so on. But I wrote about that because as a father, it was as terrible for me as it was for Susie. But she came through it, even wanted to save the burst appendix that had been taken out and brought it back to Westport, Connecticut, where she lives.
Your daughter has a tendency to collect some very interesting things. Oh my gosh, the story of the crocodile head that those crazy boys at Borneo Divers brought to Dima one year is another classic.
Yeah, that we'd done together. That gosh, I have to think back where that was, and that was somewhere way out in the Western Pacific. But our friends, she told our friends there who had the dive operation that she was dying to have a crocodile skull, and they smuggled it back in their equipment for the big diving operation each year called Dima, the big convention and everything. And we brought it home and it stank. It was still bad because it had gurry on it. And the story I wrote about was our trying to get the gurry off. And we buried it in an ant hill up in Maine by the house and thought they'll certainly scour it clean, eat every last scrap, and went back 2 days later, and the ants had totally disappeared. They deserted the ant heap, and the book is full of stories like that, and we laughed about it, and
just hysterical. We won't do a spoiler. That was so funny.
We need a lot of humor today, don't we?
Oh my gosh. Well, here's something that I want to tell you about. Since I told you that I was doing the summit a long time ago, and you know how you step into things and you're not quite sure what's going to happen, and sometimes you're faced with these things that are fairly concerning, like technology issues and things like that. And then you come across some amazing opportunities and some amazing people. And I wanted to let you know that I had posted to the Coral list that I was doing this summit and letting them know that you and Sylvia and Jean-Michel and a whole bunch of scientists and NGO representatives on the Coral list were going to be on the summit. And it got a few of them to thinking. And this is where we start to flex our muscle. And they came up with this idea, and I want to run it past you because they're looking for people to support them. And can I read it to you? This is kind of like a statement from people from the Coral list. And it says here, leading experts in the marine sciences agree that coral ecosystems are now being confronted by a number of issues which pose great threats to their future health and well-being. Among the major threats are coral, blah, blah, blah. We know the blah, 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 right? The scuba diving industry has a unique relationship with the underwater world because, to a great extent, the prosperity of the industry depends on healthy coral reefs. Therefore, it is clear that it is in the industry's best interests to help preserve and protect these vital resources. With that in mind, we call, now this is the group from the Coral list, I love this, we call on the industry as a whole to come together and explore ways to address the threats. Because of the nature and severity of the issues involved, we feel that we must act now to facilitate an industry-wide initiative aimed at conserving coral reefs around the world. There are a number of positive actions that can be taken by every level of stakeholder, including individual divers, dive shops, resorts, certification agencies, and manufacturers. We believe that specific actions would best be determined by a panel of experts comprised of scientists and dive industry leaders alike. We realize that global threats cannot be reduced by divers alone, but the industry can play an important and pivotal role by taking a public stand
which will draw attention to both the issues and viable solutions. In making this is in closing, in making this appeal, we are asking divers around the world to join with us by showing their support for this important and timely effort. Working together, we can make a difference and save our coral reef ecosystems for generations to come.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Very well put. And of course, diving has so escalated amazingly. I don't know how many million divers today. This is a very large body of defense if they take action, indeed. And it takes us getting up and saying no to this, saying yes to legislation that helps. Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. It's very well put. And coral reefs for divers have most especially been the area in which they're interested, because there you have the mass of beautiful fish, and the reefs themselves very evidently, visually, you can see, and I've encountered this increasingly over the years, these last years in which I still dove, are dying and just turned brown, the color gone, the fish diminished, and so on and so forth, because it all starts in the food chain with the macro life, the small life that is engendered by the reefs, and all of that area feeds on that. The larger fish called the apex predators, sharks, barracuda, and so on, feed on those fish. The whole food chain comes back and focuses on the health of those coral reefs. That was very well put. I'm glad to hear it.
Are you going to be a signatory on this?
Am I what?
Are you going to be a signatory on this?
Oh, absolutely. And I also repeat, pardon me, that very frequently today I have reports from Environmental Defense Fund and so on, and Wild Aid that Shark Savers now belongs to, and so on, to, yes, just hit the button, hit your button where it says, agreed, yes, I would like to sign on. It is easy to do, and to make it effective, there are millions of divers all over the world who should care, and we do.
Excellent. Well, this is what I think they're going to do, is they're going to put it online so it'll be easy for everybody around the world to sign on to, and just show the kind of support and momentum that our industry is getting and taking to become more sustainable.
I couldn't be more pleased to hear that. That was very, very well put.
Well, Stan, in 8 decades of saying things so beautifully, I'm going to ask you to give some words of encouragement and support to all the people on this summit who are here to learn and here to network and share and just find a safe place to be able to share all of our worries and next steps. So what would you give them as words of encouragement to well, you said to me when I started the summit, you said, go for it.
I'd say that a big word of encouragement can be the means of communication today that we're having right now. Cyberspace and an effect that can be made with just a tap of a code. It is easy to be heard today. And at this age right now, because I'm going on 93, I am more aware than I have ever been all through my life of what a beautiful planet we still have, and the peril in which it stands, which is voiced amply now by top environmental scientists, climatologists in the world. And there is no denying that we are already involved in disaster. So these means, which are through electronics, to make yourself heard, with your own actions, with your own means. If you are enormously wealthy, give some part of it to the environmental movement, and it won't hurt you, and you can help, and you'd better. The fact that it isn't happening tomorrow, that the rising sea is not going to inundate Manhattan this year, puts people off. But if you give a hoot about your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, it is coming fast enough to impact very heavily on them. So make your move, take time, think about it, and give some care to it, because not just the planet, but the human race is in peril. It'll be long past the time in which I'm living now, and you are, who may be hearing me say this, but it's coming, and we had better take our arms against it. Did I say that? I hope you recorded that. You know, I don't think about saying things like that, but I think about it, and I have a great grandchild now and a bunch of grandsons, and they're all the young ones, the ones old enough for divers, and we're all part of the system, and we better take arms against it. Say to the destructive elements, submit yourself, and give it all you have to protect the heritage we have.
Your words are always generous and heartfelt, and we so love you for being with us and being such a leader and a hero and just a really, really witty guy.
Oh, wait a moment. Let me get my wife in so you can hear.
And I understand your wife is also up for sainthood.
Yes, great lady, and I guess our marriage now is 65 years old, and it's very worthwhile to hang in, because at this age, to have somebody who cares for you, and I'm not quite as agile as I used to be and so on, and cares for you, it's a wonderful thing. We have a good life, and we appreciate it and use it well, and you better appreciate and know what you have right now, because the scenario that's way ahead of us is a pretty heavy and negative one unless action is taken now.
And we're going to do it. That's why we're doing the summit, and that's why so many people we're bringing together so many people who are doing it all over the world, and we just want to spread the word that it's the clarion call. This is it. It's we're being called to serve right now, and you've been serving and having fun and showing us the beautiful underwater world for over 8 decades. Thank you so much for all you've done and all you are doing to help support us and encourage us and open our eyes to what's going on under the sea.
And thanks from here. Thank you for coming on my screen. I've enjoyed this talk, and bless you for what you're doing. This is a good act that you have. Thank you, too, from here.
Thank you, Stan. Big hugs and kisses, and hope to see you soon.
Hope so, too.
You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.